Happy birthday, healthcare. Tomorrow marks 2 years since it was signed into law, and critics say it exceeds federal powers laid out by the Constitution. And next week, they'll get to make their case before the U.S. Supreme Court. But House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi now saying that the law meets the fundamental goals of America's founders.
What our founders put forth in our founding documents, which is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that is exactly what the Affordable Care Act helps to guarantee.
How about that with Kentucky Senator Rand Paul with me now. The Republican senator is also an eye doctor. And sir, good morning to you. Thank you for coming back to America's Newsroom. Nancy Pelosi says if you want to be a photographer, a writer, an artist, a musician, you can do so. Under the Affordable Care Act, you have the liberty to pursue your happiness. What do you think about that?
Somehow forcing people to buy something that they may or may not want, it doesn't seem to me to be consistent with pursuing happiness. So this also comes from the same Congresswoman who told us we could read the bill after she passed it. This also comes from the same Congresswoman who was incredulous when we told her that this violated the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, and now that decision is actually going to be made in the next few days, or at least heard in the next few days. So I'm not sure Congressman Pelosi is necessarily up on our constitutional or founding documents history.
As we move toward the Supreme Court arguments next week, and it will be the headlines every day next week for sure. If you do not win at the Supreme Court level, what is the Republican strategy to go after this law? Are you going to pick it apart piece by piece and declare victory in some areas and not so much in others?
You know, I think it's better than 50% chance that we win at the Supreme Court level, and we have to very much hope for that because it's difficult to repeal. The only reason the Democrats passed Obamacare is because they had 60 votes in the Senate, and that's very unusual. No parties had 60 votes in the Senate, or at least Republicans haven't in over 100 years. So repealing the whole thing will be hard. We'll still fight for complete repeal, but who knows what will happen, whether or not we'll have to settle for partial repeal. But I really believe fundamentally that you can't say that by my inaction, by me not buying insurance, that that's somehow commerce. So I think the Supreme Court's going to side with common sense, and I really think this is going to be a major victory for those who believe in a government that should be limited by the Constitution.
We're getting various opinions on that, and I appreciate what you're saying there. We'll see whether or not in the end you are right or not. But your proposal is to allow every senior citizen in America to have the same health care options as a member of Congress, like yourself. Explain that.
Well, part of the Tea Party platform has always been that when we pass laws or we create benefits for congressmen or federal workers, should be the same for everyone. So our Medicare reform would save $1 trillion over 10 years, but would allow every senior citizen to have exactly the same health care, which is a gold-plated, great health care plan. It is subsidized, but it is more market-oriented, and it will save the taxpayer money to let senior citizens have the congressional health care plan.
What do you mean it'll save us money? How so? How much money?
It saves about $1 trillion over 10 years, and it does it in a couple of ways. One, when you bring in competition, competition works. When people have to pay for something, they bid prices down. That's why capitalism keeps offering cheaper and cheaper products. We do two other things, though. We gradually let the age of eligibility rise over about 30 years, and then we also means test the benefits, which means wealthier individuals will have to pay the full cost of their Medicare.
Well, why wasn't this considered in the first place?
Well, we're still working on it, and I think the more people hear about it, the more people like it.
2 years ago, before the law was passed.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I wasn't here then, might be part of it, but now that I am here, we're going to make it part of the debate. If the Supreme Court strikes down Obamacare, which I think they may do, I'm hoping to have my idea about allowing people to have the congressional health care plan. I'm hoping that becomes part of the debate.
Well, what is your sense now as a doctor 2 years into this law? What has it done to medicine in America?
I think my biggest fear is that millions of people are going to lose their private insurance and be dumped onto Medicaid or government insurance. That will be a tragedy for the patients who lose their private insurance, but also a tragedy for the country because Medicaid is very expensive, and it also will be a tragedy in the sense that people will have to wait and have to have their health care rationed over time. So I am very concerned about the consequences of Obamacare.
You know, they're taking this up on the House side, too, the so-called death panels, the IPAB, PAB, so we'll follow that vote on the House side. Senator, thank you for your time.